You're listening to Cash and Sass. I'm Lisa Marie, your go-to gal for all things money. As the Sassy Wealth Queen and the brains behind the Sassy Wealth Coach, I'm here to take you on a thrilling ride from the financial chaos to sassy and sexy money. Welcome back, my sassy friend, to another episode of Cash and Sass. I'm Lisa Marie, the brains behind the Sassy Wealth Coach and this podcast. And of course, I'm known as the Sassy Wealth Queen. And today with me, I have Bridget Cook-Burch, and she's called Bridget the Book Whisperer. That just has so many things I want to ask. A New York Times bestselling author, mentor, and speaker, known for riveting stories of transformation. Her work has been showcased on Oprah, Dateline, Netflix, GMA, NPR, among others. Bridget's own intense NDE changed her life and the stories she was telling herself. This set her on the path to discover other extraordinary stories. As CEO and founder of Your Inspired Story, Bridget offers a safe space and deep experiential learning. Bridget is a co-founder and former executive director of, I'm going to do that damage, Shiro's United. Yeah. I think I did that right. A nonprofit that helps women and families rise from trauma. And you can learn more, and I'll have the link, but it's yourinspiredstory.com. Okay, there were some tongue twisters in there that I wasn't quite prepared for. I should have practiced. Thank you very much, Bridget, for being on the show. We're, of course, going to dive in, y'all, to the candid conversations. And one of those things that you were talking about is how you changed your life by the story you were telling yourself. And so I think it's important for us to talk about, when we have these belief systems, especially around money and wealth and those kind of things. What was your belief system before, and how did you have to go about changing that?
Well, I had a complexity and layers of belief systems, which I'm sure you have come across many times, and I've heard some of those in your brilliant podcast. And what I would say is I had a religious belief about, that a wealthy person cannot get into heaven, right? That it's easier for a camel to get through the eye of a needle than for a person to go to heaven. And that one was very deeply embedded. I didn't even realize I had it for a long time. The other things were what a lot of humans face, and maybe your listener faces this too, and that is feeling unworthy for money, like that I had a lot of character defects. And so that somehow made me bad, sick, and wrong and not worthy enough to have money. And I was good at making it, but I wasn't smart in the way that I could do something with it or make better choices. I was working 3 jobs and going to school at the same time, going to college, and I was just wearing myself completely out. And those beliefs were, you're not good enough, you'll never make enough money, somehow you've got to survive. So I was in survival mode for a long, long time, all the way leading up to that hospital experience, my near-death experience. And it was it was really crazy how much this had a stranglehold over my life, because it was completely and totally a scarcity mentality. And I've been able to, rise out of layers of that. But it's interesting that it's not just one thing. Usually for most of us, I find with our stories, it's multiple.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, and, I have the stories all the time that, in order to have money, you had to come from it. So if you didn't come from wealth and you didn't marry into wealth, you were never going to have it. You were always going to work those 2 or 3 jobs to make ends meet. And that was just life, and that's the way it was, and to accept it. And for so many years, I did that barely making ends meet and the insurmountable amount of stress. One of the things I think is important is us to talk about when we need to face those old belief systems. Because, one, always tell people you got to acknowledge it. You've at least got to acknowledge that you have that belief, and then, realize where it's coming from. But part of that is facing that old belief system. How do you work with your clients, or how did you face that old belief system and start peeling the layers off and saying, okay, this isn't true?
Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, when I was in the hospital and I'm listening to these two nurses outside in the corridor and they're saying, she's not going to make it until morning. I was devastated because I knew I had not fulfilled the measure of my creation. I didn't know what that was, but I knew that I'd come here for something and that I was leaving without having done it. And it was crushing. And then I had this experience. I was promised a new chance at life. And I took the bull by the horns. And it's interesting because the scarcity mentality followed me for a while. But one of the things was, okay, if I was wrong about these other beliefs, if I really was worthy, if I really was lovable, if I was worth loving unconditionally, then maybe some of these other beliefs were not as accurate as what I had thought. And I did some deep dives and I took a look at, I had really incredible adoptive parents and they're just mom and dad to me. And I took a look at some of their beliefs and they had some scarcity going on. They were wise with the money they had, but they had a bit of scarcity mentality. And all around me, with my friends and associates, there was a lot of scarcity mentality. So couple of things were to listen to people who were smarter with money than I was. And I began to grow in the ability to understand and becoming an entrepreneur. I, it's vital if you have scarcity going on that you hang around with people who are very open, very visionary, have incredible ideas that are more expansive because then you don't stay in a box. So, since we're
Mm-hmm.
having a very candid conversation, I will say that that there were times too when I felt perhaps a little arrogant or overconfident about something, and I would jump in without considering all of the ramifications, or I would jump in if someone that seemed to have a lot more knowledge than I did suggested it without maybe talking to a bigger circle of associates, doing more research on my own. It's like, oh, if so and so says this, then this has got to be the thing. And so um, it, it that can be really devastating when you make a mistake. And I will just speak for myself that there were a couple of mistakes that I've made in business that have, and in my personal life that have really um, forced some learning. But then what's beautiful is not to make that same mistake again. And I know you're going to get
Mm-hmm.
into that because you talk about that. But I also grew up with this mentality that you can't make mistakes. You've got to have the right answers. You've got to memorize the right responses. If you make a mistake, you keep it really on the down low. You don't talk to people about it. It's part of the reason why I love this podcast is, just how
Yeah, well, I mean,
vulnerable
it's
and
yeah,
real.
because it's yeah, because I mean, it's like if you make a mistake, you're not supposed to talk about it. You're not supposed to talk about money. You're not supposed to talk about, I grew up where we didn't talk about money, mental health. We didn't talk about any of those things. Okay. You didn't talk about the mistakes. You didn't talk about any of it. It just wasn't discussed, especially to people outside the house. You just weren't supposed to do that. And that's the reason why I love my podcast because I call BS to all of it. Because if we don't talk about it, then we can't learn from it and we can't help others with it. Right. And I
Mhm.
think it's really important, for my listeners, for you to understand that you're not alone and that you may be feeling like or just coming out of a mistake that you made. Right. Okay. Mistakes happen. Life happens. It's just the way it is. And sometimes what I like to reframe them as being is learning experiences. Y I don't know, I like learning experiences better than mistakes. I've made them, trust me. Um, but when I look at them of, "Okay, what can I take from it? What can I learn from this?" My coach likes to call it, what can we create from it?" Like,
Mm.
okay,
Oh,
this happened. What can we now create from it? And it's just a way to reframe it as a learning experience. Okay, what can we now create from this? And it has you look at it in a different way of where when we look at it as a mistake, especially with money, we're beating ourselves up, we're beating ourselves down, we have our head in the ground and we don't look at anything except beating ourselves up. And so when you look at it as a learning experience and what can we create from it, it just has a way of, I don't know, you just have a way of like your brain does a switch and you're able to look at it slightly differently, right? Um, how how have you been able to work with your clients and helping them, you know, drop these beliefs and manifest new ones, right? I call it flipping the script, and I tell people all the time it is not done overnight. Your mindset is something that you're going to continuously work on for the rest of your life. That's just the way it is. It's not a one-time done thing. But being able to powerfully manifest and as you call it, bust through any glass ceiling, right? So not stopping yourself, not stunting yourself from that growth.
Mhm.
What are some your experiences and what have you done to help others with that?
So, well, I'm a storyteller, so I'm going to tell you a story.
Go right
So,
ahead.
when I was
I love it.
about 8 or 9 years old, my parents and I, my whole family, we were at a festival, and there were so many exciting things and wonderful things to try, from food to all different kinds of wonderful uh, items. And there was something that caught my eye that I desperately wanted, and it was a unicorn. And I was really into unicorns back in the day. And I ran to my father and I said, Dad, I found this thing and I'll pay for it with my allowance. I just, I don't have the cash on me today. Can you do this? And he opened his wallet and he had a couple hundreds in there, but he's flipping through and he's like, nope, I can't afford it. I can't do this. And I looked at that and I saw the cash that he had in there. And I never believed he was a cash cow, but it was like, what is up with that? And what I realized was that there was shame in asking for money, and that, it was out of my reach, and that, yes, there's a lot of abundance in the world, but for some reason, I'm not to have any of that. And and what I will tell my clients is the stories that you tell yourselves are the most important stories on the planet, because it's how you operate. Then it becomes your operating system, and it's how you're going to view the world. And so what I did to counteract that was to realize that that abundance is this beautiful, never-ending river. It is constantly flowing. And it may, the banks may be overflowing at times, and then other times it may be down just a bit, but it never stops. And that it is a tool. And that has been one of the biggest um, reframes. And a new story that I was able to tell myself is, this is a tool, and I know how to use a lot of tools.
Mhm.
So how can I utilize this for the highest benefit? And it's interesting too, because much of my success, I'm a New York Times and Wall Street Journal bestselling author. I have multiple national bestsellers and international bestsellers, and many of my books are translated into different languages. But what I needed to understand for myself, and what I began to see in my authors, was this story of abundance. Where is it about scarcity and limitation? Where is the story about opening yourself up to something greater? And one of the things I have noticed is that as as people bravely move forward to write their stories about themselves, they automatically see where scarcity came into their life, whether as a child or a teenager, as an adult. They are able to disentangle from some of those things, because now they're looking back from today and seeing how those stories affected them. And there's something about this open conversation, like what you start, about abundance, and being able to witness for ourselves how these stories began. And then the beauty of it is that if this is a tool and you can leverage it, if this is a tool and you can utilize it for a really fantastic life, then what are some of the things that you can slowly begin to visualize? Like, I have more than enough to pay all my bills. And when you have a bigger view for what is possible in your life, you have your bucket list, you have your dreams of travel, of meeting people, of coming out of your shell, of coming out of your comfort zone. Like, we never know how many days we have to fulfill on the planet. So if we,
Mm-hmm.
instead of the graveyard being the richest place on the planet, we want our souls, our happiness, our homes, our everything full of joy and abundance, then what does it mean? What steps do we get to take, even baby ones, to begin? And the beauty of this is when you have one win, it starts to change the mental files. And then you get another win and it starts to
And it
change the
starts
mental files.
multiplying.
Yes. And I
And it
feel
starts
two things
multiplying.
that are great multipliers. Number one, gratitude is the great multiplier. It's the greatest
Hmm.
multiplier I've ever seen. And it is a mental and emotional shift. And that brings more people abundance. And the second thing that I find that is just so beautiful is when people choose to be of service. It feels to me that there is a benevolent force on the planet that has the desire for greater things for all. I discovered that personally, and I've seen it over and over and over again in my clients. So not only are they overcoming the stories that they've been telling themselves, but usually they have something to share, to give to others. And when they go into that mindset of, I want to prevent someone from experiencing as much pain as I have, or I want them to experience abundance quicker, or I want them to experience health and humanity quicker, or mental health quicker, and they choose to be of service. It's like the windows of heaven open, and I'm not a preacher, but I'm just saying this benevolent force. And um, to be of service seems to add an incredible force of energy along with your own dreams of, not just
Hmm.
surviving, but really thriving. And I love to study different backgrounds, belief systems, other things. One of the things that I studied was the chakra system, and that's been around for thousands of years. But it's interesting, most people are in this, I'm going to eke by to survive. And that's part of the base, the sacral chakra, which is all about survival. It's Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Is there enough food on the table? Can I take care of my kids? Is there a roof over my head? And am I accepted among my peers? And this is where money can get kind of funny because, if we have big dreams, it might alienate the rest of our family if they're in scarcity mentality, we feel. But if we move up to the second chakra, it is called Svadhisthana in Sanskrit, and it means the honey and the nectar and the sweetness of life. Svadhisthana. And you have to take a step out of survival mode in order to really taste that sweetness. And the beauty of it is that you begin to be more abundant and people actually become more attracted to you. And so my authors who are becoming leaders, they see this, like the more joy they have, the more abundant they feel. And they might not have more dollars in their pocket, but they're more expansive in their dreams. And then these ideas and people and resources come to them because they're being of service. So it is like this full circle, which I know you've seen over and over of how we can live a greater, more expanded, more abundant life. And that's number one, I am worthy of holding this and having this and sharing this. And number two is that if I'm to help other people, if I'm just barely scraping by, I'm only going to reach two or three, maybe 5, 10 people. But if I am abundant in my thinking and expansive and open, I can reach tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, perhaps even millions of people. And so it is about, stepping out of that and changing the story that we tell ourselves. So,
Hmm. Yeah. Okay. I absolutely love that. Um, because here's the thing is I tell people all the time, clients will come to me and I want to make a bigger impact. I want to help more people. Okay. Well, can you do that when you're barely scraping by? And they're
mhm,
like, no. Then how is it? Because, a lot of us were taught that it was selfish to want more, right? It's selfish for us to want to make more money. It's selfish for us to want uh, certain things or whatever. Okay, no, not really. And I used to have that story. That was story was told to me. I used to have that belief, and I was able to see and reframe it because no, it's not. Because if I'm barely getting by, if I'm scraping by, then I can't have a bigger impact. I can't help more people. I can't support more women entrepreneurs. I can't get my voice out into the world. Whereas if I have the wealth mindset and abundance mindset, and I understand that I can have more money, because the more money I have, then the more I can actually support and help and get my voice out there. And and you were saying that of the service, it's one of the reasons why I started this podcast is because I'm so tired of money being a taboo subject.
Mhm.
There's money podcasts out there, but none of them are having candid conversations about all the complexities, the things that make it what it is, or our thoughts and our feelings around it. And we need to be able to have these candid conversations so that we can learn from it. And there are other women entrepreneurs out there that may be afraid to say, "Hey, I'm struggling with wealth mindset or money mindset." And from the podcast, you can learn. Okay, one, you're not alone. Two, every single person I've had on as a guest has had some type of complexity, scarcity mindset, whatever that may be, and they've been able to not only work through it, but then able to make leaps and bounds on being able to make a bigger impact. And so it shows you what's possible. It shows you that you don't have to have a glass ceiling, right?
Mhm.
And I think that's the biggest thing I can like stress is, when you have that different type of mindset. And to me, I tell people all the time that I don't want to be rich, I want to be wealthy.
Mm.
There's a difference. There are tons of rich people who are still poor and are miserable. Being wealthy is it being aligned with your values and your goals and your desires. And being wealthy is more than just the money. It's wealthy in all these areas of your life, right? And I've talked about them with
Mhm.
the wealth codes. It's the spiritual, the physical, the mental, the energetic, and the financial. And I think it's really, really important, to have that, to realize when we have that type of mindset of how much we're able to really change the world and make a bigger impact. Whether you're writing a book, whether you're starting a business, or again, I tell people all the time, whether you're up leveling, because up leveling brings in every up level brings a new devil. It's just the way it is. And being able to have those things, I know that's my saying, and someone said that to me, and it is literally in my brain. And every single time, like I'm doing a huge up level in my business, and every single time I start hearing something, I'll say, every new level brings a new devil. You're just a new devil. Okay, you know what? It's okay. We're safe, and we're still doing this. And being able to reframe it, right? And
Mhm.
say that it's okay and that we can still do this, and be able to really, really change your mindset on your worthiness, and to your abundance is just so important.
Yeah.
And manifest new ones. Why not? I mean, y'all,
Yes.
we have one body and one life. Why not? I
I agree
I
1,000%,
don't know
even
about
in the
you.
middle
I
of the
don't want to.
pond.
Yes, I mean, I don't wanna live inside little tiny 4 walls and not, and not live. I it life's hard enough as it is. We don't it doesn't need to be harder. And honestly, here's the other thing. I tell people all the time, I'm going to be harder on me than anyone else, and that's because, again, the most important stories that you're ever going to be told are the ones you tell yourself. So if you're telling yourself you're worthless, then that's what you're putting out into the world. If you're
Mhm.
telling yourself that you're never going to make any more money, that's what you're putting out into the world, because it's what you believe. And believe it or not, your actions are going to follow what you're telling yourself. So, I tell people all the time, my clients especially, I say, okay, this is what you're telling yourself, but what are your actions? Are your actions and the thoughts aligned? And if they're not, then we need to figure out which one is in the scarcity, and okay, let's flip it. Let's work on that. Because you're right, Bridget. The most important stories that will ever be told are the ones you're going to tell yourself.
Hmm.
Literally, we can be our own worst enemies, and being able to recognize if you're doing that is important so that you can change it, because that's going to be the first step. Would you agree?
Oh, 1,000%. And I like how you said, why not change it? We can always write a new chapter. That is something so unique and
Yes.
remarkable about
Turn the
humans
page.
is we have that ability to write a brand new chapter, and our book can head in a completely different, trajectory, situation, circumstance. It's all here. And as you mentioned, there's different levels,
Mhm.
energetic and from your heart. And I love that you walk us through all of those things. But it's interesting too that Harold Goddard said, he said, the destiny of the world is determined less by the battles lost and won than by the stories it loves and believes in. And so the destiny of your world is determined less by those battles lost and won than by the stories you love and believe in. And there are times when you just say, it's time to write a new chapter, and to listen to someone like you, Lisa Marie, and these incredible guests that have, such beautiful, compelling stories of overcoming is amazing. And I wanted to share, you can have two dichotomous things going on at the same time. You remember the economic fall of 2007, and you're younger than
Oh,
me, so
yes.
hopefully it didn't have as
The
big of
house
an
the
impact.
the house the housing market crashing in 2008.
Hmm. And so at that same time, two things were going on in my life. One was that lesson, the huge lesson that I had. I had really excellent credit, and I was talked into being the backer behind a house that was being built, and it was, a beautiful house worth a lot of money. And I listened to a friend who says, "We've been doing this. We've been making so much money. There is no risk for you of any loss." And I was a single mom with three kids, and I listened. But at the same time, so that was in my personal life, and I lost it. And it was a big lesson. But I learned so much from that experience in the middle of this, that I was running a trucking company. We went from a one truck wonder to 15 trucks and 55 trailers and 11 Western states, me and my partner. And 600 trucking companies failed at that time, Lisa Marie. It was a horrific time in logistics. And how we continued was that being of service. It was like, I'm writing a new chapter, and we're going to continue to stay in business. And I'm not going to let these old stories be what it is. So everywhere we went, we created win, 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 what I called the expandable win. How do we win? How do our customers win? How do their customers win? And instead of failing, we grew enormously during that time. And it was just, again,
Mhm.
that being of service. And so I started to tell myself a new story. I started to watch that pattern, and then I've watched it with my authors, and it's amazing. That's one of those new stories you can tell yourself is, I am worthy. And because I have something to give, who can I serve with it? Boy, it opens and broadens your life in incredible ways.
Yes, and I love the way that you said that we can start a new chapter, because I've actually say that all the time um, when I'm talking to people. I'm like, "Look, if you don't like the story, turn the page, write a new one. Write a new chapter, write a new story." I compare it to these games that my girls have, that they play the games, and then they'll get two scenarios of which direction they want the story to go. I'm not into them, my girls are, and they get to choose the direction, like this or that. I'm I'm like, and then if they don't, the next time if they don't like it, it's basically, okay, you want to do this or this, and they choose the direction of their story. Well, we're the same way. We can actually say, oh, I don't like the direction this is going in. I'm going to turn the page and change the story. The
Mhm.
key is you have to decide. You have to decide that's what you're going to do, and then take the steps to do it. And, a lot of times that first step, that hardest step is the decision, just the acknowledgement and then the decision. But honestly, why not? Because, I mean, if you make that decision, think about all the things that you can do out of service. Because when we think about serving our clients, the abundance actually comes because you said you ended up being, you know, one of the you end up being very successful money wise and everything because you grew when all these other trucking companies were, you know, going out of business or, whatever. And so it's because you looked at it and said, okay, what can I do differently during this struggle? And you were able to pivot, but two, you looked at it as a pivoting from a place of service. And that's huge. That's huge. I mean, take nothing from this podcast, just this episode. Remember that you can actually decide and you can change your story, you can change your chapter, you can change the book, just turn the page. You have a free offer for the listeners. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah. A lot of times just like with abundance, a lot of times when people are wanting to take a look at their stories and they're wanting, to share something, but they get a little nervous about maybe I'm not good enough or no one would listen to me. I have a beautiful program called Author Unleashed, Crushing Your Fear. And it is a free program on my website for you and for your listener. And Lisa Marie, it's available at yourinspiredstory.com. And there's a place there for beginners where you can start. And I would love for you to be able to go there. There's also another free program called Author Unleashed Going Pro. And it gives you further steps if you take a look at that story and go, huh, maybe I do have something worth sharing. Maybe I do have something that I could get out into the world and publish. Then the Going Pro gives you that further information and knowledge.
Sweet. I like that because I think majority of us could probably write a book on certain things. I mean, I joke all the time, say, been there, done that, could write a book on it. And yet I haven't written a book on it. They're like, have you wrote a book yet? No. Then why you keep saying that? Because it's just true. I've been there, done that, could write several books on it. I say write several books on it. And that's the whole thing is to realize that, we can make different changes. There are things that we can overcome. We don't have to listen to the stories that we keep telling ourselves. We can actually say, okay, I don't like this story. I want to change it, especially when it's stories that we tell ourselves. Thank you so much for being here. Is there one last thought that you want to share with the listeners before we close this episode?
I think it's
One
a
last.
little last oomph. Yes, I would love that. I would say this, that there is deep value in who you are and a significant role that you came to play here on the planet in just where you are at,
Mm.
precisely where you are at. And if you write, if you journal, if you begin to put some of these things down on paper, there becomes more clarity in your own mind and heart, and also more value with which you can share with others. And so I highly encourage you to do that. In fact, any of you who have experienced trauma with money, they've been doing all kinds of scientific studies that show if you write your stories down, that you change the place in your brain where you come from. So instead of from fight and flight, you actually are coming from the
Mm-hmm.
observer, which is a more powerful place to come. So no matter your story, it has value. Write it and acknowledge it and witness it, and
Mm-hmm.
then write a new story.
Absolutely. Don't let it hold yourself back. There is enough abundance out there for everybody, and it does not matter whether you came from wealth or not. I can't stress that enough, and I love the fact that you say in writing, the money traumas, and because I'm trauma informed. I'm actually almost done with the certification of being trauma informed, and I think it's really important that when we write our stories down and we acknowledge it, that we're able to then come from that observing and not that flight or fight. And then when we don't come from that flight or fight, we're able to break through those glass ceilings because we're able to say, you know what? I want to change my story. I'm going to rewrite a new one. And being able to do that, and that will change your relationship with money. Being able to have the gratitude will change your relationship with money. So I absolutely love that. So thank you again for being on the show. I truly appreciate it. These are conversations I could have for hours and hours and hours. And my sassy friend, remember, until next time, stay sassy. Bye. Thanks for joining us this week on Cash and Sass. Check us out on social media and on our website at www.thesassywealthcoach.com, where you can download my free Money Story Start Guide. The website again is www.thesassywealthcoach.com. And as always, subscribe to the show to catch every new episode and leave us a review so we can continue to bring you fresh content. And remember, yes, it is possible to have sassy and sexy money. See you next week.